We're going to take a look at Liberty Ammunition's Civil Defense round. Now this is an ultra-light, ultra-fast plus P9mm round. It's only 50 grains and it's got a very wide, deep hollow point cavity. Now in the past I've tested this for performance, both into bare ballistic gelatin to see if the bullet performs as it's advertised, and also through an intermediate barrier. So I've shot this round into gelatin and seen it perform appropriately. Shot it through some very heavy industrial safety glass, 3 panes in fact the last time we did it, and we saw it perform adequately there as well. Now what we want to do is make sure that this is going to be reliable in typical defensive firearms. So we've got two different firearms here. I've got a mid-size Glock. This is a Glock 23. It's actually the first Glock I ever purchased back in the mid-90s, but it's been converted to 9mm. I'm a big fan of 9mm for personal defense. There was a time when I thought 40 Smith & Wesson was a better answer. That time is past. So this is a converted mid-size gun, essentially a Glock 19. The other gun I've got is this Kahr P9. Now the Kahr P9 is a subcompact 9mm, and this is a very lightweight, very highly concealable defensive firearm. The question is, will these lightweight rounds be reliable in these two proven firearms? Now both of these firearms have shot plenty of ball ammunition. I've shot obviously tens of thousands of rounds out of this one over the years, so we believe the guns to be perfectly reliable. Now it's really a question of the ammunition. Now why wouldn't they be reliable? Well, one of the things that people are concerned about is the very lightweight projectile. If I pick up 3 of these rounds and I put them in my hand compared to 3 of these normal personal defense rounds that I carry regularly, there's a huge weight difference. In fact, these feel almost like plastic dummy rounds. They feel like snap caps. Now they are actually obviously lethal ammunition. They're plus P rated, and this 50 grain bullet is moving at 2,000 feet per second. So it's significantly faster than these slower, heavier bullets would move. Now the concern is there's not going to be enough force pushed back. Obviously it's that equal and opposite reaction thing. The concern would be that there's not going to be enough force pushing back against the breech face to operate these semi-automatic firearms. Now obviously Liberty Ammunition assures us that isn't the case, and a little bit of experience I've had with these rounds makes me think it won't be, but we're going to go ahead and check it out and make sure that we can prove that we are beyond a shadow of a doubt going to be able to rely on this ammunition to function our defensive firearms under normal, plausible defensive shooting situations. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that now. We're going to alternate between both guns. I've got several hundred rounds here, and again, we're looking for any malfunctions. If we have a malfunction, we're going to try to figure out, is it the ammo, is it the gun, is it the magazines? We have a lot of things that could go wrong here. There's a lot of variables, and that's one of the reasons we brought several magazines and 2 guns. So let's take a look. All right, 3 magazines through the Kahr, and we had 3 malfunctions. The first 2 malfunctions were failures to fire. I'm going to go pick up those rounds and see if we have light strikes, see what the problem may be. The second one was a failure to feed. Now, it's interesting, the Kahrs are plagued by the fact that not always getting reliable chambering when you rack the slide. And of course, that's the way we teach people to reliably put a round into the chamber after a reload. At the end of the reload, stick a magazine in, rotate, and rack the slide. The Kahr did that twice. First, when I initially loaded the gun on my first critical incident slide lock reload. On the second reload, it didn't, and I actually had to depress the slide release, the slide lock lever, to get the round to chamber. Now let's go to the Glock. Again, I've had much more experience with this Glock and definitely expect this firearm to perform flawlessly without any of those hiccups we have with the Kahr. Let's see how the ammunition does here. And again, we have a failure to fire. Let's take a look at the ammunition and see what we're getting. All right, these are the 2 rounds that I found on the ground over there after my tap and rack. Neither one of them have any indentation or any indication whatsoever that the striker came into contact with the primer. So at this point, we really can't blame the rounds. If the rounds had been struck, then we'd have an issue. Now, it's possible that they didn't seat, that they didn't go all the way into the gun, into the chamber so that the gun could fire, but we have to believe that was the case because we heard a click, which means that the gun completely reset, and comparing these bullets to the unfired bullets coming out of the box, they look identical. So sure, there could be a slight difference as far as like bringing out calipers and checking them, which I don't have with me right here at the range, but visually they look exactly the same. Those rounds are chambering. These rounds must have been chambered enough to get the gun to go click, and yet there's no striker imprint. So if we continue to see this, we're going to have to look at the the Kahr as being the problem and not the Liberty ammunition. Let's go ahead and fire some of this through the Glock and see what happens. All right, so we've had a lot of rounds go through the Glock without any problem. We're gonna go back to the Kahr, and this time if I do have a malfunction, I'm gonna go ahead and stop. I'm not gonna clear the malfunction. I wanna examine exactly what's going on with the gun and the ammo. One thing I will say about this gun and this ammo together is that I'm not feeling a lot of recoil like you might normally feel with defensive ammunition out of a very lightweight subcompact single stack, which means thin gun, means I'm getting a lot of energy transfer to my hand. This is much more like a reduced recoil round, something like the Winchester W, the D, the hollow point round, as opposed to maybe like a PDX-1 Defender full power defensive load that we would be used to out of this gun. So that's another advantage of the lightweight projectile, is that we have less perceived recoil. Going back to the Glock. All right, I'm gonna go back to the Kahr, and again, because we have to hit this slide release in order to reliably get these rounds into battery, you'll see me reload the Kahr a little bit differently than the Glock. So far, so good. Let's see what we got. That's our first failure to feed with this ammunition. So we had a round that clearly fired just fine, and we had a failure to feed behind it, or a failure to extract. Hard to define. Let's go back in there. All right, so we have shot several hundred rounds now of the Liberty Ammunition civil defense round, and here's what we had. We had one legitimate failure to feed inside of this Glock. Now, we can say anything we want about the condition of this Glock, the fact that it is a very old, very used, as you can see, pretty dirty gun, but it's also well maintained, and this is a gun that I do carry and use for personal defense. So this gun I would consider to be very reliable. We had one failure to feed in it. Now normally we recommend that you do at least 100 rounds of any potential defensive carry ammunition through your defensive carry gun to ensure reliability. If you have any failures, we tell you to move on, look for another piece of ammunition to go into that gun, which you already believe to be reliable. 200 is what I do personally. We were well beyond the 200 round mark in that Glock when we had the one failure to feed. So technically we would have gotten past my standard for carrying this gun and that ammunition together for personal defense. That's important to note. With the Kahr, the only problems we had are known problems with the Kahr itself, which is a failure to feed on racking the slide as opposed to hitting the slide release. So that's really a technique-driven failure. Personally, I do consider that a flaw with the design, so we know that that's a known issue. Other than that, we had good performance. What we didn't have was any light strikes. That's one of the things that we do worry about, is a light strike. In other words, that the primer is struck by the gun that's setting off all kinds of other ammunition, but it's not setting this off. We had 0 of those. We had no light strikes. We didn't have any failures of the round to seat itself fully into the chamber when it was clear of the magazine, so that's important. What we did have was one failure to go through a complete cycle. We had one double feed, which means that we had a failure of the empty case to get out of the way as the next round was coming up, and again, that was on this Glock modified gun. This is a Glock 23 modified to be like a 19. 18 shooting 9mm. Now, what does that mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things, but the worst case scenario is that the lightweight projectile did not create enough rearward force to push the slide back far enough for this round to hit the ejector and knock it all the way out of that ejection port. We didn't have that problem at all with the subcompact Kahr, and admittedly, this is an older gun. Now, here's the lesson learned. Well, personally, I think you need to be testing any ammunition in the gun that you intend to carry it in for personal or home defense. You need to check that yourself. Regardless of whether I shoot 5,000 rounds or 5 through my gun, your gun is going to be a unique situation. The Liberty Ammunition civil defense round is lightweight, and that means it may not have as much force pushing back on the slide of the gun as a normal defensive round. So you need to be able to check your gun with this ammunition. What we do know is that the ammunition fires when it's chambered in the round. It goes into the target just like it's supposed to. We also know that the ammunition performs the way it's supposed to inside of gelatin. As far as individual reliability with any gun, that's something you're going to need to research. Our results here today were one double feed out of probably about 400 or 500 rounds out of one of the 2 guns that we tested.